The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Sandra Chen had been the director of the Millhaven Children's Hospital Foundation for 9 years. In those 9 years, she had opened a lot of letters. Grant notifications. Donation receipts. The occasional generous check from a local business trying to improve its reputation before the holidays. She had never opened a letter like this one. It was a single page. No letterhead. The handwriting was plain and careful, the handwriting of someone who had thought about every word before putting it down. It said that the writer wished to make a donation to the Pediatric Oncology Wing, the Children's Cancer Unit, in the amount of $1 million. Sandra read it twice. Then she read the next part. The donor asked for one thing in return. Not naming rights. Not a plaque. Not an invitation to the annual gala or a press release with their photograph. Just one quiet request, written near the bottom of the page in the same careful handwriting. Please do not say my name. Not publicly. Not privately within the organization. Not to the press, not to the board. I would like this to simply exist, without me attached to it. Sandra set the letter down on her desk. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and called the bank details listed at the bottom of the page. She needed to verify the transfer was real before she let herself feel anything about it. It was real. The Pediatric Oncology Wing had been in crisis for 3 years. Not the visible kind of crisis, the patients still received care, the staff still showed up, the hallways were still painted with murals of animals and clouds that someone had commissioned 12 years ago when the wing first opened. From the outside, it looked like it was functioning. But Sandra knew the interior truth. The equipment was aging. The MRI machine used for pediatric scans had been repaired 4 times in 2 years. 2 of the patient rooms needed renovation, the kind that couldn't be postponed much longer without becoming a safety concern. The Family Resource Center, where parents stayed during long treatment periods, had a waiting list of over 30 families. The foundation had been fundraising aggressively for 2 years. They had raised enough to maintain but not enough to transform. The gap between where they were and where the children needed them to be was, in round numbers, just over $1 million. Sandra had been living with that number for a long time. She called Dr. Amara, the wing's chief of oncology, that same afternoon. Sit down, Sandra said. Dr. Amara sat. Sandra told her. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Long enough that Sandra said, Amara. Are you there? I'm here, Dr. Amara said. Her voice was careful, the way voices get when a person is managing a feeling that has arrived faster than they expected. Who is it? I don't know, Sandra said. And I've been asked not to find out. The man who sent the letter was named Walter. He was 67 years old and he lived alone in a house on the east side of Millhaven that was larger than he needed and smaller than people expected. He had sold his engineering firm 12 years ago at a price that had made him quietly and significantly wealthy. He drove a 10-year-old truck and ate breakfast at the same diner on Clement Street every weekday morning, sitting at the same stool, ordering the same eggs. The people at the diner knew him as Walt. They knew he tipped well and read the paper and never seemed to be in a hurry. They did not know what he was worth. Walter had made the donation for one reason. A private reason that had been sitting with him for 22 years. His daughter, Rachel, had been treated in the Millhaven Pediatric Oncology Wing when she was 7 years old. Leukemia. 14 months of treatment, 2 rounds of chemotherapy, the particular slow terror of watching a child fight for her life while trying to hold your own life together around the waiting and the hoping and the not knowing. Rachel had survived. She was 29 now, living in Portland, working as a teacher. She called Walter every Sunday. He had never forgotten the wing. The nurses who remembered Rachel's name. The family room where he had slept on a narrow couch for 3 weeks during her worst treatment period. The mural of a giraffe on the wall outside room 14 that Rachel had talked to every morning. 22 years later, he wrote the letter. Sandra spent 2 weeks trying to honor the request while also managing the practical reality of a $1 million donation. The board needed to know the gift existed. The legal team needed to process it. The finance department needed to record it. All of that happened. But Sandra was careful, almost protective, about the detail the donor had asked to keep private. In board meetings, she referred to it as the anonymous gift. When staff asked, and they did ask, because $1 million appearing without explanation generates questions, she said simply that the donor had requested privacy and that the foundation was honoring that request. Most people accepted this. A few didn't. The foundation's communications director, a man named Peter, came to Sandra's office on a Thursday afternoon and sat down with the expression of someone who has prepared an argument. "Sandra," he said, "do you understand what this story is worth? An anonymous $1 million donation to a children's cancer ward. The press alone, the donor visibility, the matching gifts it could inspire." "Peter," Sandra said. "I'm saying the exposure could generate another $500,000 in response donations. The story of the mystery donor." "Peter." Her voice was quiet and firm. "They asked us not to. That's the end of this conversation." Peter left. Sandra turned back to her window and looked at the parking lot below and thought about the careful handwriting on the single page. Someone had given $1 million and wanted nothing back. The least she could do was give them that. The renovation began in March. Walter watched it from a careful distance. He didn't go to the hospital, he didn't want to be seen there, didn't want to invite the connection. But the hospital was 2 miles from his house, and he drove past it sometimes in the morning on his way to the diner. He would slow slightly. Not enough to draw attention. Just enough to see. The scaffolding went up on the east side of the building first, the Family Resource Center expansion. Then the windows of the wing were replaced, the new glass catching the morning light differently. A delivery truck arrived 1 week with medical equipment, a new pediatric MRI system, he assumed, from the size of the crates. Walter ate his eggs at the diner and read his paper and thought about Rachel at 7 years old, her hair gone from the chemo, asking the giraffe on the wall good morning every day. His daughter called on Sunday as she always did. "You sound different," Rachel said. "Good different." "Do I?" Walter said. "Like something settled," she said. "Are you okay?" "Better than okay," he said. "Tell me about your students." She told him. He listened the way he always listened, completely, without rushing. Her students were 8 years old. She taught them to read. She told him about a boy who had finally cracked the code of phonics that week and read his first full sentence alone. Walter listened and was very glad to be alive and very glad his daughter was teaching children to read in Portland, Oregon. In April, something unexpected happened. A journalist named Clara Watts, who covered health and community stories for the Millhaven Gazette, began asking questions about the renovation. She had noticed the scope of the work, it was significant enough to be visible, and had submitted a public records request about the funding. Sandra received a call from the foundation's attorney. "The public records request is limited," the attorney said. "The gift is recorded as anonymous. That's legally protected." But the journalist is persistent. "How persistent?" "She's talked to 4 board members already." Sandra went to the board that week and made the case clearly. The donor's request was a condition of the gift. Honoring it was both an ethical obligation and, frankly, the foundation's word. If word got out that the foundation didn't honor donor privacy, it would damage trust with every future donor who had ever asked for discretion. The board agreed. Unanimously. Clara Watts called Sandra directly 2 days later. "I'm not trying to cause problems," Clara said. "I just think it's a remarkable story. $1 million, no name attached." "I understand the appeal," Sandra said. "And I can confirm a transformational gift has been received and is being applied to the renovation. Beyond that, I can't help you." Can you tell me why the donor wants anonymity? Sandra thought about the letter. About careful handwriting. About the one quiet request at the bottom of the page. No, she said. But I think they have a very good reason. Clara Watts did not give up. She was good at her job in the particular way that good journalists are good, not through pressure, but through patience. She talked to former patients. She talked to nurses who had worked in the wing for decades. She talked to families who had spent long weeks in the resource center. She was building the story of the wing itself, even if the donor remained unnamed. In June, she interviewed Dr. Amara. The interview was about the renovation, what it meant, what had changed, what families would experience differently now. Dr. Amara spoke about the new equipment. She spoke about the expanded family center. She spoke about what it meant to treat children whose families had traveled hours and had nowhere decent to stay. At the end of the interview, Clara asked the question she had been building toward. Do you know who gave this gift? Dr. Amara looked at her. No, she said. I genuinely don't. And I'll tell you something, I've thought about it a lot. About who gives $1 million and asks for nothing. And I think whoever it is has a reason that's more important to them than recognition. I respect that completely. Clara wrote the story. It ran in the Sunday edition, a long piece about the wing, the families, the renovation, and the anonymous gift. She described the donor simply as a private individual with a personal connection to the wing, a detail Sandra had offered as the one thing she could share. It was accurate. It told just enough. Walter read the article at the diner on Sunday morning. He read it slowly, the eggs cooling on the plate beside him. When he finished, he folded the paper and set it down. He left his usual tip. He drove home. He sat in his kitchen until the phone rang. It was Rachel. Dad, she said, did you read the Gazette today? I did, he said. The Children's Hospital. The renovation. A pause. The anonymous donor. Walter was quiet. Dad, Rachel said slowly. Was that you? He didn't answer immediately. He sat with the question for a moment the way he sat with most things, letting it settle before deciding what was true to say. Why would you think that, he said. Because you've talked about that hospital my whole life, Rachel said. Because you drive past it. Because you always say that the people there saved me, and I know you've never forgotten that. Another pause. And because you sound settled. Like something's done that needed doing. Walter looked at the kitchen wall. On it, a photograph, Rachel at about 9 years old, 2 years after treatment, standing in front of their house with both arms spread wide, grinning at the camera with the particular joy of a child who has come through something and is on the other side of it. Rachel, he said. I need you to do something for me. Anything, she said. Don't tell anyone. Not your friends, not your colleagues. No one. I asked them not to say my name, and I need it to stay that way. A long silence. Okay, she said. Her voice had changed. It carried something he couldn't quite name, not quite pride, not quite grief, something that lived between the two. Dad, she said. Thank you. For doing that. I did it for the giraffe, he said. She laughed, the same laugh she had always had, unchanged by years. I loved that giraffe. I know, he said. I remember everything. The Family Resource Center reopened in September. Walter didn't attend the ribbon cutting. He watched from across the street, parked in his truck, for about 10 minutes. Families were going in and out. Staff members stood near the entrance, smiling. There were children, some with the specific look of children going through treatment, the careful walk, the tired eyes, being led inside by parents who were trying very hard to look calm. Walter watched one father in particular. Mid-30s, carrying a small bag on one shoulder and a stuffed animal tucked under the other arm. He was holding his daughter's hand, and as they walked through the entrance, the father paused for just a moment, one hand on the door frame, and his face did something that faces do when relief and grief and love arrive at the same time. Walter had worn that face once. He remembered the exact quality of it. He started the truck and drove to the diner, even though it was evening. The owner, a woman named May, saw him and poured coffee without being asked. "You look like someone who had a good day," she said. "I did," he said. "Anything special happen?" Walter thought about the father at the door. About Rachel at 7 years old. About the letter he had written in his careful handwriting and the one request he had made. "Not really," he said. "Just a regular day." May refilled his coffee and moved on. Walter sat at his usual stool and drank his coffee and felt exactly the way he had hoped to feel when he sent the letter. Not important. Not recognized. Just right. Rachel visited in October. She drove down from Portland on a Friday and stayed through the weekend. They cooked together on Saturday, Walter's chili, Rachel's cornbread, the meal they had made every year since she was old enough to help. They ate at the kitchen table with the photograph of 9-year-old Rachel on the wall, arms spread, grinning. On Sunday morning, Rachel asked if they could drive past the hospital. They drove slowly down the street. The renovated wing was visible, the new windows, the expanded entrance, the family center addition that stretched along the east side of the building. A small garden had been planted along the walkway, which Walter hadn't seen before. Flowers, just beginning to settle into their roots before winter. Rachel looked at it from the passenger window without saying anything for a long moment. "Room 14, she said finally. "Yes," Walter said. "Is the giraffe still there?" "I don't know," he said. "I expect so." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were wet, but she was also smiling, the same complicated mixture he had heard in her voice on the phone. "Why didn't you want anyone to know?" she asked. "I've been thinking about it. You could have had your name on the building." Walter kept his eyes on the road. "Your grandfather used to say that the best thing you can do is the thing that helps someone and costs you nothing but the helping." He paused. "Having my name on something, that would have made it partly about me. And it wasn't about me. It was about every family sitting in that waiting room at 2 in the morning not knowing if their child is going to be okay." Rachel was quiet. "It was about you," he said. "But not the way people would have printed it." She reached across and took his hand the way she had when she was 7 years old, walking down the hospital corridor in her small socks. They drove home. Walter made coffee. Rachel read the Sunday paper. Outside, October was moving toward winter, the light going golden and low the way it does, and the house on the east side of Millhaven was warm and full and entirely ordinary. Which was exactly how Walter wanted it.